Hello, everyone. I'm Matthew Allen, and welcome back to What a Book. Today, we continue on in Hanging Chads. Chapter 16. The more you ignore me, the closer I get. Oh, fuck. I'm in love, Maddy thought as she strode to Christy and Jason's townhouse after work on Wednesday and reflected on the day's events. Erick had returned to the shop at his usual time earlier that day and apologized for his emotional reaction from the day before. Maddy was apologetic as well, but Erick insisted that she had no reason to apologize. She had no idea why he had really moved to New York because he had not told her, and for that, he was extremely sorry. So, why did you move to New York then? Maddy had inquired. Erick responded with, Do you remember a few weeks ago when I told you that I walked around angry all the time, and this place was my oasis of happiness? Well, I'm going to tell you everything that I walk around angry about all of the time. I haven't told you this before, because I just didn't want to spoil the one place that I can let all of this go, and I didn't want to burden you, my good friend, with my issues. You can tell me anything, Maddy offered sincerely. Okay, but this isn't going to be fun. Erick began as his head bowed with a despondent look upon his face, a single tear rolling down his cheek. He explained that he and his wife had met as teenagers in Jefferson City, Missouri, and had become high school sweethearts. Both attended Mizzou, and they were married shortly after their college graduation. He became a junior high public school teacher. She worked in health insurance and steadily climbed her respective corporate ladder. And she was beautiful, always was, in fact. She was intelligent and had a carefree spirit that made him eager to return home each evening. They laughed together during happy times and cried together during times of loss and sorrow. They vented to each other about their daily professional stressors. They were each other's support system, always having each other's back. From the time they had met at the age of 16 until the year 2020, it had been a wonderful 28-year relationship. He had always been independent politically, leaning slightly right of center if he had to categorize his position. He had voted for Obama in 2008 but switched to Romney in 2012 out of his belief that the Affordable Care Act was an unfair burden to businesses. She was politically apathetic for the most part, but always voted for the candidate that she felt had the best heart, regardless of party affiliation, policy issues, or ideology. They rarely discussed politics, let alone argue about it. Maddy recalled that as Erick spoke, his face became increasingly redder, and his voice became louder and more pronounced. Then came COVID. Their families had both succumbed to the radical right-wing propaganda that was spewed by narcissistic, greedy blowhards on the internet and cable television, and these family members were increasingly whispering in their ears. To Erick, their attacks upon lifelong medical professionals while watching the circus of self-gratifying daily press conferences was pure insanity. Then came the transparently stupid attacks upon the 2020 election with a who's who of right-wing freaks leading the charge against our constitutional democracy. The right-wing party had become one that was advocating dictatorship over democracy, marginalization of minorities over equal rights for all, and fantastical worldviews over fact-based reason. Basic human rights and public health measures were not just being ignored, but actively attacked by the people who were electronically injecting this vile Kool-Aid into their system on an hourly basis, and Erick could not wrap his mind around what was happening. There seemed to be no ability for these people to be reasonable. In fact, any fact-based arguments were greeted with the immediate response of fake news. He tried to put on a smile and enter into a polite conversation with these people, including members of their families. He would end up sitting in the corner shaking his head in disbelief at the utter madness that he was forced to listen to from people who were otherwise reasonably intelligent. Oftentimes, he would just leave early as he felt his blood pressure rise, with a full understanding now of how Nazi Germany had come into existence through the indoctrinating messages of hate into a willfully ignorant and self-serving public. And in their isolation, his wife became one of them. It was not as though she woke up one day and was a completely different person. It happened slowly, over time, as she was increasingly bored at home and spent more and more time listening to broadcasts that had been recommended to her by her family and friends. Erick tried to offer counter-programming, but his offers were ignored, if not outright mocked. She began calling him sheeple. He received the vaccine as soon as it was available to him. She did not because of government microchips or some such nonsense. Therefore, they basically lived in separate areas of the home as Erick did not want to risk contracting the virus and spreading it to his students and their families. They were increasingly isolated from each other, but she had her large tribe of like-minded thinkers to support her. Erick did not. He felt as though he were a tiny speck of rational blue in a sea of increasingly red hysteria. Then, in the fall of 2021, came the attacks upon school boards and teachers, including Erick personally, for teaching the actual history of our country, warts and all, instead of some whitewashed America First propaganda designed to alleviate bad feelings that white students might harbor for the atrocities of their distant and not-so-distant ancestors. There were death threats via the telephone, email, and notes left on the front door, all for trying to explain to the children of our country how the depravity of slavery continued to impact all of our society to this very day. It was a fact that Erick failed to understand opposition against. Finally, at a school board meeting in October, Erick was personally attacked outside of his car. With their unmasked, unvaccinated spittle flying into his face, he was called a traitor. He was called a commie. He was called a libtard. And those were the kind words. Erick had opened his car door, looked each of his attackers in the eye, and simply said, "I can't stand watching you people fuck up your children anymore. You're just too fucking stupid to waste my time on. If any of you motherfuckers tries to take a swing at me, I'll fucking kill you. Now fuck off." And with that, Erick's 22-year career had come to an end. He returned home and explained the reprehensible scene to his wife, hoping that this level of insanity might shake her from her self-imposed pod of ignorance. Instead, she looked at him with a blank expression and said, "They have a point. Why do you hate our country?" And Erick lost his shit. He casually walked over to the kitchen door, picked up the aluminum baseball bat that he had placed there for protection, and, in a frenzied blur, proceeded to destroy every phone, computer, radio, and television in the house. Fragments of the devastated electronic devices were flying throughout the home as Erick was completely absorbed by his blind rage. She screamed at him to stop. He did not hear her, nor did he stop. She left him that very night. He never saw or spoke to her again. 2 weeks later, she contracted COVID. 3 weeks later, she was dead. He was devastated by the loss of his lifelong love and his impotence at not being able to do something about it. He had been saving and investing his money since he had begun working at the age of 16. He wasn't wealthy, but he had enough to live on for a while anywhere he chose. And he chose New York. He put his house on the market, most of his belongings in storage, and moved there on January 1st, 2022, with a simple New Year's resolution. Don't kill anybody this year. Erick looked up at Maddy and saw his tear-filled reflection in her understanding, tear-filled emerald eyes. She had wanted to reach out to him in a comforting embrace, but felt that she could not. Here was a man who understood the deterioration of our basic societal norms, just as she did. Her emotions swelled from romantic interest to adoration. She still would not admit to herself that she had fallen in love, however, until Erick looked up, wiped his tears from his cheeks, flashed his ornery grin, and said, "But the real reason I moved to New York is because, well, it's my kind of town." "Oh my fucking God," Maddy exclaimed. "That is the best fucking joke I've ever heard." The pair burst into hearty laughter while looking admiringly upon each other. And with that, Maddy Sommers was the first to realize that they had fallen in love. The only trick now was to get a Mr. Erick Parker to fall in love with her. This required a great deal of thought, organization, and a foolproof 3-step plan that Maddy unveiled to her friends that Wednesday evening. As appetizers, wine, and gin were being consumed, Maddy proudly stood before her trio of sisters and presented her strategy. "Okay, gang, thanks for listening to this. Okay, I finally met my prince. I know it sounds weird, but it's almost like the universe or something has, brought us together or something. So I think we're meant to be together, but Erick's, still going through survivor's guilt and stuff, so I need to be cool about this. Here's my plan. Numero uno, get him to ask me out on a date. Numero two, we fall in love. Numero three, we live happily ever after. What do you think?" The three just stared at Maddy in disbelief. Each knew that any form of contradiction would be unwelcome at this point. Sam and Christy looked at Jules in order to nominate her as the spokesperson. Jules let out a heavy sigh and said flatly, "Yep. We like it. Not too many details. What could possibly go wrong?" "Awesome. Thanks for your support. I'm getting another drink. Anybody want anything?" The trio shook their heads, and Maddy triumphantly left the room. They continued shaking their heads in amazement as Christy said, "Well, this is either going to be really good or really bad." "Yep," Sam agreed. "We'd better check this guy out. She won't survive another relationship like the last two, and we'd better give Blair a heads up." The pact was made. Erick was about to endure the most comprehensive investigation that could be performed short of an anal probe, and even that was not necessarily off the table. As Maddy was making her drink in the kitchen, She saw 6 brilliant blue eyes peering at her from around the corner of the staircase that led to the family room. She stared at them, and they stared back. She suddenly felt the gruesome weight of the tragedy that had befallen the missing children and broke down into tears. The 6-year-old twin boys and 4-year-old girl made their way into the kitchen. "Aunt Maddy?" the tow-headed girl said while looking up at Maddy with a worried expression. "Why are you crying?" Maddy forced a chuckle, wiped her tears, and got down on one knee. "I'm crying," Maddy began, "because I'm the luckiest girl in the world to have such great huggers in my life." With that, the 3 children enthusiastically charged Maddy, knocking her over and pinning her to the floor in their ornery but loving embraces. They rolled around on the floor, tickling each other and laughing when Jason came upstairs and said, Maddy? Everything okay?" Maddy playfully shoved her 3 cackling attackers onto the floor, stood up and said, "Yes, everything is okay, because these lovely children have a wonderful man who will always protect them. I know how much Christy appreciates you. And until the events of this week, I didn't realize how much I appreciate you too. Why don't you take a break? I'll watch these guys for a while." When Christy came downstairs to check on things, she found Maddy asleep and encased by her 3 beautiful blonde children. The children were all lying on her in a variety of near impossible angles, mesmerized by their first viewing of Cinderella. On Friday morning, Maddy was once again aiming herself for battle. She looked at her black duffel bag, kicked it to the side, and dug into her closet for the cutest pair of pumps that she had. She got dressed and looked at her reflection in the mirror. She was wearing her form-fitting purple dress, stopping just above the knees, and black-strapped pumps. Yep. Fucking irresistible. Okay, Mr. Parker, prepare yourself to get royally fucked. Well, hopefully. "Wow, you look great," Erick said as he greeted Maddy at the store that afternoon. "Oh, this old thing?" Maddy demurely replied while batting her eyes. They took their spot on the long couch and began their conversation with the typical bad jokes and discussions of current events. Maddy searched for the perfect opportunity to begin her romantic assault, but there was no natural openings. That is, until later when Erick came up to the counter with a record to purchase. As Maddy looked at the cover of One-on-One by Cheap Trick, she said, "I've heard this record is really good, but I haven't heard it." "Well, you can borrow it if you'd like," Erick replied. "Well," Maddy began innocently while looking down, "I actually don't have a turntable. I'd have to go to someone else's house to listen to it." This resulted in a deep sigh of exasperation and rolling of the eyes by Erick. "What the fuck is wrong with you, mister?" Maddy exclaimed. "Okay," Erick began. "Do you remember a while ago when I told you not to let anybody change you?" "Yeah," Maddy responded with her full attitude on display. "What does that have to do with anything?" "Well," Erick continued, "I'm only human, and there's only so much that I can take, so why does a cool chick like you not have a turntable? Get a fucking turntable so that you can borrow this record, okay?" This resulted in another round of arguing as the pair went back and forth with, "Fine, maybe I will buy a turntable." "Good, I think you should." "Great, then I will." "Awesome, I'm so glad that you're doing that." Spontaneous laughter ensued as Erick said, "This has been fun. See you next week. But seriously, get a fucking turntable." As Erick left the store, Maddy thought, well, we kinda missed the fucking point there now, didn't we? "Strike one," Sean said as he walked past Maddy with a slight grin. "Shut the fuck up, Sean," came Maddy's bitter response. The following Tuesday, with Maddy adorned in a cute low-cut sleeveless flowered top and mid-thigh length pink skirt, Maddy said, "So, what are you doing for supper tonight?" "Oh, I'm going to eat at a Berselli's," came Erick's reply. "Yeah, I've always wanted to try that place, so are you going with friends, or—" "No, just dinner by myself, but—" "Do you like spicy food?" Erick answered. "You know I do. Why?" Maddy replied demurely while batting her eyes as her heart began racing, and she thought, "Oh, fuck, it's happening." "Well," Erick began, "if you ever go, try the marina with spicy sausage and red peppers. You'll love it." "Yep, I'll be sure to do that," Maddy replied as a lonely trombone was heard in the distance going, "Wah, wah, wah." "Strike two," Sean gleefully said as he paraded by his frustrated boss. "Shut the fuck up, Sean." Sean came back over to the counter and said with a hint of sarcasm, Hey, do you want some pointers on how to pick up guys? Because I've really been hitting the mother load recently. His beaming smile faded as Maddy raised her head, and he saw her deeply annoyed and perhaps violent expression. Okay, guess I'll get back to work now, he said as he left the counter, silently chuckling. The following Wednesday, with Maddy wearing a black t-shirt with silver sequins that spelled out the Ramones and tight blue jeans, Maddy said, Hey, if you ever hear of a band coming to the club that I would like, let me know, okay? 'Cause I'd really like to go. Her eyes were batting as fast as they could go as Erick replied, Yeah, I'll do that. Maybe I'll see you there. See you Friday. Maddy frustratingly thought, Okay, mister, you know what would be a surefire fucking way of seeing me there? If you'd realize that we're meant to be together, and you ask me out and we go together. That would be a surefire fucking way of seeing me there now, wouldn't it? Sean began approaching the counter. Maddy looked up and said, Don't even fucking say it, Sean. Sean stopped, gave Maddy a sly grin, and held up 3 fingers. The ink pen narrowly missed the back of his head as he made a hasty retreat back to the storeroom. That night at Jules' apartment, a frustrated Maddy was expressing her bewilderment to her friends and aunts who were in town that week. What the fuck is this guy's deal? I mean, we get along great. We have the same interest. We both have great senses of humor. That last line caused everyone in the room to look down so that Maddy could not see their eye rolls. And, Maddy continued, I'm fucking adorable. So, what the fuck? You sure he's straight? Jules inquired flatly. Yeah, he's fucking straight, Maddy answered annoyingly. Christy chimed in and said, Well, maybe you're just not his type. Maddy just stared at her coldly and slowly shook her head. Well, I'm sorry, I've got nothing, was Sam's brilliant contribution. Blair then added her voice to the chorus. Dear, he's just had a traumatic loss. He may not be ready to date yet. If it's meant to be, then it will be in due time. And always remember, I know it sounds old-fashioned, but I've always felt that a lady should wait to be asked out by the gentleman. Fuck that, Patty exclaimed. If I lived by that rule, then I never get laid, because my dates are always chicks. But if that's how you want to play it, Mads, remember that this dude hasn't asked a girl out in 30 years or something? This motherfucker has no idea what he's doing. If you want him to ask you out, you're going to have to hit him over the head with it. Blair looked at Patty in order to make her understand who it was that she was talking to. Patty hastily retreated. I mean, figuratively, not literally. Don't really hit him over the head. Guys don't like that. I've heard. Okay. New plan, Maddy thought. It's brilliant, Maddy thought. I'll go out with another guy a couple times. I'll tell Erick about it. He'll get jealous and ask me out. Fucking brilliant. The full range of Maddy's junior high maturity was on display as she regaled Erick about the new guy that she had started seeing. It didn't work. That's really nice. You deserve to find someone cool. Hey, have you seen the new Netflix series? Was Erick's uninterested response. The following Tuesday, Erick was at the counter purchasing his latest treasure. Maddy was also at the counter desperately contemplating her next offensive when the man that Maddy had dated a couple of times came strutting into the store. His shirt was unbuttoned halfway down his slender chest with 3 gold chains prominently displayed. Hey, babe, the man stated as he seductively leaned across the counter at his assumed paramour. What the fuck is this guy doing here? Maddy thought. Oh, shit. I was supposed to go out with him tonight, and when the fuck did we get to Babe? Hey, what are you doing? Well, the man replied alluringly, I just wanted to come in and tell you how excited I am about our, third date. Maddy immediately thought, fuck, why did I even tell him about that? He thinks he's getting laid. Think fast, think fast, think fast. Yeah, about that. Listen, someone called in sick for tonight, so I'm going to have to go to work. And I'm pretty booked up the rest of the week, so maybe I'll give you a call next week or something. The man immediately became despondent and said in a childlike whine, Babe, it's, our third date. What am I supposed to do? Maddy callously replied, I don't know what to tell you. Build a model airplane, stream a movie, adopt a shelter animal. I don't know, but I have to work. Fine, just forget it then. the man angrily exclaimed before turning and leaving the store. Cool. That was easy. Now, about Erick, Maddy thought as Erick then came up to her laughing. Wow, that guy really wanted to go on a third date with you, Erick playfully stated through his chuckles. Okay, this is it, Maddy schemed. I'm gonna wipe that smug smile right off your face and we're going out tonight or else my name's not Maddy fucking Sommers. And that's my name, so that's what's happening whether you like it or not. Maddy was looking down at a paper, pretending to be filling out a form as she began in her most alluring voice. Yeah, that's not going to work out. Besides, I just went out with that guy a couple times to try to make this other guy that I really like jealous, so... She then looked up and gave Erick the full Maddy, head slightly tilted to the left, her radiant copper hair framing her beautiful freckled face, and those emerald eyes glistening as flashes of auburn batted over them. Why can't a nice guy like you ask me out sometime? Erick's eyes widened as his smug smile disappeared. He just stood there looking at her with a shocked and dumbfounded expression. He finally was able to stutter. There's another record that I was going to buy. I'll be right back. And in that moment, although he would not yet admit it to himself, Erick Parker realized that he had fallen in love with her. Well, I think he's finally got it, Sean dryly stated. Yep, the ball's in his court, a hopeful Maddy replied. And if he doesn't hit this ball back, then he's not going to have any balls left to play with. What the fuck was that? Erick thought in a state of confusion. His mind was swimming. What did she mean by that? Should I ask her out? Should I feel guilty about asking her out? Jesus, I haven't been on a date in 30 years. I don't even want to date anyone, but it's Maddy, so... Yeah, it's just Maddy. She probably meant for us to go out as friends. And certainly there's nothing wrong with asking a friend out. Yeah, I'll just ask her if she wants to go to the show tonight, and she has to work anyway, so she'll turn me down, and I'll come back in tomorrow and everything will be normal. Yep, this will be fine. Erick had difficulty in repressing the knowledge that his rationalization was ridiculous. Erick summoned as much courage as he had available to him and attempted to be cool as he strutted over the long counter as though he were grooving to a T-Rex song. Maddy looked up at him expectantly and batted her lush eyelashes once more as he said, You know, it's too bad you gotta work tonight, 'cause I'm seeing a really cool band at the club, and I think you'd really like them. You know, if you were interested. But I know you gotta work, so... Maddy immediately cut him off, not allowing her prey to wiggle his way out of the romantic trap that she had sprung. That sounds really cool, who's playing? These two friends had never had a moment of awkwardness or trepidation between them from the moment that they had met. They knew each other so well, and their bond of friendship was so strong by now that their trust in each other was absolute, and they were both surprised at the tension that surrounded them in this moment. It was as though they were two combatants feeling the tight anticipation of an upcoming battle. The pressure was immediately relieved when Erick confidently said, they're called Southern Culture on the Skids. They've been around for, 30 years or something, but they play really cool, what I call swampabilly, and I think you might dig them. Seriously? Maddy stated excitedly. They're in town? How the fuck did I not know that? Erick flashed his mischievous smile as if he knew a game between them was now afoot and said, in as condescending manner as possible, Now, Maddy, you really don't have to try to look cool around me. I know you have cool taste in music, but you really don't have to pretend you know who this band is. His face beamed with arrogance as he was sure he had caught his friend in an embarrassing predicament and was mentally preparing his victory speech. Well, listen here, mister. Maddy began in an overly emphasized, annoyed tone while mirroring the arrogance plastered on his face. I'll tell you what. If I can name 10 Scott songs off the top of my head, then you're buying dinner and drinks tonight. And let me tell you, I'm gonna be one expensive fucking date. And if I can't, well, then I will, of course, pay, which I can guarantee you will not be a problem. Deal? Each word dripped with satisfaction as she knew she had just kicked his ass, brutally and quite publicly. The arrogance faded from Erick's face once he heard her refer to the band as Scots. He knew he was fucked, but the points had yet to be officially scored, so he retorted with false confidence. Yeah, okay. You got a bet. You know, by the way, I like really expensive cocktails, and I'm in a 3 appetizer mood, so you might want to check what you have in your bank account, 'cause this might get ugly. He felt that the only way to throw her off her game would be to project such overconfidence that it might affect her ability to concentrate. Maybe she would only be able to come up with 8 or 9 song titles, and a hard-fought and well-deserved victory would be secured over his worthy and now surprisingly alluring opponent. Maddy locked her fired-up eyes upon Erick's, took a deep breath, and began rapidly firing out song titles. Fried Chicken and Gasoline, Double Wide, Firefly, 8-Piece Box, 69 El Camino, Camel Walk, Viva del Santo, Banana Puddin', Dirt Track Date, and... Oh, shit. I need one more. There was a glimmer of hope in Erick's eyes as he began to lift himself off the virtual ropes that this musical juggernaut had mercilessly knocked him into, until Maddy said in her most pompous voice, her head held high with her lips open and spread upward in the most conceited smile in her arsenal, "Just fucking with ya. Soul City, motherfucker. Maddy out." Erick burst into congratulatory laughter as he enthusiastically joined the celebration of his friend's decisive victory over him. It was never about winning with them. It was all just for the sport of it all, and he reveled in the moment as he gazed upon the prideful expression on her precious face. She had bested him, and he loved it as he sensed that their battles had just been taken to a new level. She may have won this round, but there would be many more to come. This kittenish war was far from over. Chapter 17. 8-Piece Box. Maddy, taking her Aunt Patty's advice to heart, took control of the arrangements for their first date. But first, they had to agree that it was, in fact, a date, as Erick had taken their previous exchange completely as a joke. "So," Maddy began, attempting to control her excitement by playing it cool. "That sounds super fun. So what did you have in mind?" "What did you mean?" Erick inquired, now realizing that she was really serious about going out together. "Well, would we grab a bite to eat first, or—" "Oh, sure. I mean, you won the bet and all, so—" Erick replied as he desperately attempted to find his footing in this unfamiliar discussion. I was just going to go to the burrito joint, but we could go anywhere you like, and since I'm stuck with the bill, you should probably pick someplace better." "No, I love the burrito joint, but they're just so huge." "That's what she said," was Erick's response, followed by laughter by the pair and pathetic eye rolls by a listening Sean. "Well, okay," Erick continued, now feeling sure of himself after his perfectly timed joke. "How about we meet at the burrito joint at 6, split a burrito, go to the show, and maybe we could grab a drink afterwards. You know, if it wasn't too late." "So," Maddy countered demurely with her head slightly cocked to one side, "this would be like a date, right?" Well, I don't know that we have to put any pressure on it by labeling it. How about if we just go out and see if we have a good time and then decide what it is?" Erick knew this response was ridiculous as the words haphazardly fell from his mouth. He also knew that he had just set himself up for yet another round of humiliation at the hands of his pint-sized adversary. And Maddy didn't disappoint him. As she listened to his ridiculous comment, she immediately thought, "Oh, I am so gonna fuck him up right now." And she did. "Okay, let me get this straight. You're taking me to dinner." "Well, it's just the burrito joint," came Erick's embarrassed reply. He lacked the courage to even look at Maddy's piercing green eyes as she gleefully tore apart his argument. "Yeah, but it's still dinner," she calmly said, to which Erick replied defatingly, "Yeah, I guess so." "And you're taking me to a show?" Maddy's voice continued to lilt into a sing-song cadence as she spoke. "Yeah," came the timid reply. "And you're taking me out for drinks afterward?" "Well, if it's not too late." "And it might be a date," Maddy concluded. Erick, rediscovering his fight and realizing the absurdity of his situation, looked right into Maddy's eyes, smiled, and exclaimed, "Exactly." "Fuck it, close enough," Maddy thought to herself as she said, "Okay, this sounds like fun. Let me see what I can do." Maddy departed back to her office, and Sean approached the counter, shaking his head in disbelief at the awkward encounter he had just witnessed. Erick immediately began performing emotional damage control as he spoke to Sean about the most likely scenario. "Well, I'm sure she's back there just trying to find a way to let me down easy. I know she can't go because she has to work, so—" Sean burst out laughing. "She doesn't have to work. She just said that to blow that other guy off. You're the one she wants to go out with. She's been hitting on you for like 2 months. Did you not know that? Erick just shook his head with a confused expression as Maddy re-entered the area, fresh off calming her emotions, putting on her cool demeanor, and establishing her plan for her novice paramour. Okay, Maddy began confidently. I would love to go out on this date with you, but I have a couple of conditions first. Numero uno. You can't buy these records today, she said as she took his records and placed them under the counter. Nor can you buy them tomorrow. You're going to come in on Thursday and buy these records from me, and we're going to have an open and honest discussion about whether we should go out on another date or just be friends. This first condition was based upon Maddy knowing that Erick was going to have to take a day and process his feelings of survivor's guilt, probably by talking with Pastor Tim. Numero tuo. I get to ask you any question that I want, and you promise to not get offended and to answer completely honestly. Deal? Counterproposal, came Erick's surprisingly confident reply. Counterproposal? What the fuck? Maddy thought. I will take tomorrow and think about our time together, and I will come in on Thursday and have an open discussion about where we should go from here. And you can ask me anything that you want, but any question that you ask must also be willing to answer. Deal? The ensuing formal handshake was the final non-intimate moment that the pair would experience for the remainder of their time together. Erick was sitting at a sidewalk table on the warm but completely cloudy and gray late May New York evening. He was watching the throng of pedestrians pass by, nervously awaiting his friend. Or date. No, friend. And he was talking to the universe. Okay, this is ridiculous. Why would a cool chick like her have any interest in me? This is just stupid. Listen, if there's anybody up there that's been pulling some strings or whatever, please just give me a sign that I'm making a fool out of myself. Have a bird shit on my head or... At that moment, he looked down the street and saw Maddy standing at the corner wearing a beautiful canary yellow sundress with a white geometrical pattern. He looked at her. She looked at him. Their eyes met. And at that moment, the slightest parting of the clouds occurred, and Maddy was backlit by a single ray of sunshine. She was a bright, glowing vision in the ashen-gray city. And Erick audibly said, You gotta be fucking kidding me. The date went off without a hitch. Once their mutual nerves had calmed, they threw themselves into a deep, philosophical discussion about which Scott's album they should take should they be stranded on a desert island. It was not lost on Maddy that Erick had placed them both on the island together in this scenario. Maddy vehemently argued for Mojo Box, while Erick lobbied in vain for the electric pine cones. In the spirit of their first date, or whatever it was, they compromised on the obvious. If they ever were to be stranded together on a desert island, they would take Dirt Track Date. Erick and Maddy were sitting at Erick's preferred table about 10 yards from the main bar and 30 yards from the stage as the opening act performed. Aren't we going down front? A confused Maddy inquired. Yep, just wait for it. Wait for what? Maddy asked. For it. For the last song of their set. Don't worry. I'll let you know when it's time to move. Maddy sat there impatiently while wondering how she was going to catch a piece of chicken from here as Erick went to the bar and got 2 drinks for each of them. There was a final power chord struck as Erick handed Maddy her 2 drinks and said, Now. The entire floor audience turned to face the pair that was moving in the opposite direction. They were like salmon going against the current until they reached their destination. Erick smiled at Maddy triumphantly and said, See? Front of the stage. Maddy squealed with delight and wrapped her delicate arms around Erick for the first time. The brief embrace was simultaneously awkward and comforting. The performance was exhilarating. They danced, they laughed, they sang along. They were covered in sweat as they would wrap an arm around the other's waist in order to shout something into the other's ear. And Maddy caught her piece of fried chicken that was tossed from the stage by a provocatively dancing go-go girl as the band tore through 8-piece box. Maddy snatched it from the air and began immediately devouring it. Erick awkwardly said, That's really supposed to be used as a prop. It's not really to be eaten. What? It's fucking chicken, isn't it? I'm vaccinated, so I don't care where that bitch's hands have been. Fuck it. I'm starving. Erick just smiled and shook his head in approving wonderment. Following the show, the pair went to a small tavern, and Maddy began peppering Erick with rather intimate questions. She found his responses to be predictably rather boring. Well, at least he's not a freak who's going to tie me up and spank me and shit, she thought. She then made an error. She asked him how many women he had slept with, to which he immediately answered, 1. How the fuck is that even possible? Maddy exclaimed in disbelief. Well, I told you how long I was with my deceased wife, and I've never even thought about having a one-night stand or anything like that. I mean, I need to have an emotional connection before I'm comfortable with that. And of course, I would never dream of cheating on someone that I was involved with, even as she changed into another person that I didn't recognize. I just wouldn't be able to live with myself, Maddy. Okay, well, I guess that's commendable or something. It then dawned on her. She had to answer the same question. Erick immediately sensed her discomfort and said, You can take a pass on this one. That aspect of your life is yours and is really none of my concern. A wave of relief swept over her as they finished their drinks, and he offered to walk her home. On the 3-block trek, Maddy reached out and grabbed Erick's hand. Erick gave her hand the slightest squeeze as if to say, Yeah, that's okay. Well, this is me, Maddy awkwardly stated upon their arrival to her apartment building. Well, I really had a nice time tonight, Maddy, and I've got a lot to think about. I will definitely be in on Thursday so we can, talk. Well, it's not really that late, Maddy stated alluringly as she wrapped her arms around his waist. And I'd really like to listen to those records you bought, so how about we go back to your place and we, listen to records? Erick was not adept at picking up on social cues, especially provocative passes, but this was so blatant that even he understood its intentions. He thought, Yeah, she wants a needle and a groove, but it has nothing to do with music, before saying, Okay, Maddy, I really did have a wonderful time tonight, but I just don't want one of us to wake up in the morning and think, what the fuck have I done? I just don't want to rush into anything because the most important thing to me is your friendship, and I would just hate myself if I did anything to damage that. Okay, but I want a goodnight kiss then. Their lips met for the first time. It was the most tender kiss that she had ever experienced, sending electricity through her entire body. He said goodnight. As she floated up her stairs, she thought, Fuck, I'm really going to have to buy some more batteries. The following day, Erick was filled with anxiety, exhilaration, and guilt. He needed to talk to Pastor Tim. The first week that Erick was in New York, he wandered down a mostly residential neighborhood and found a small, non-denominational Christian church. More spiritual than religious, Erick kept walking until he noticed the various banners waving outside of the church. Pride, peace, and BLM flags were prominently displayed and flapping in the frigid January breeze. He didn't so much willfully enter the building as he was drawn into it. He took a seat in a modest back pew and looked at the eclectic medium-sized congregation that was made up of various genders, ages, and races. He listened to the pastor whose sermon was about mutual respect and caring for others in our communities, regardless of our differences. The pastor asked for the congregation to rise and sing a hymn, then left the stage. Erick got up and turned to leave when he was greeted by the pleasant smile of one Pastor Tim. Hello. I don't believe I've seen you here before. It's nice to meet you. I'm Pastor Tim. Hello. I just thought I'd come in from the cold and see what this is all about. It was, nice. So I guess I'll be going now. Won't you stay for a bit? I make a mean gin and tonic if you're into such things. Erick thought that he had never been in a more peaceful and comforting presence in his life. Pastor Tim and his husband, Jeremy, became foundational influences for Erick. He could be completely open with them and unearth his various feelings, including the hatred he harbored at his wife's murderers. They would listen and always have a piece of advice that would soothe Erick, at least in the moment. It was, in fact, Pastor Tim who had suggested that Erick build a new record collection and mentioned the bookstore with all of their used records. That conversation was held on February 13th. Erick began attending the small church regularly, usually the Wednesday evening services. Following the service, he would hang out in Pastor Tim and Jeremy's home, have a few drinks, and discuss various topics, sometimes very emotional, other times not. The evening almost always ended in disgusted laughter at one of Erick's more vulgar jokes. Although a devout man of God, Pastor Tim was not devoid of a strong and somewhat twisted sense of humor. As March extended into April and then into May, the conversation would often become about my friend Maddy. The references to her became more frequent as Erick would say things like, Oh, you should have heard what my friend Maddy said today. Maddy had the greatest laugh when I said this. Oh, I really got Maddy good today. Let me tell you what I did. You know what I really like about Maddy? She just has the most perfect smile. Pastor Tim would sit and listen while frequently giving his husband knowing glances who would, in turn, lightly tap his heart with a swooning expression. Therefore, it was no surprise to Pastor Tim and Jeremy when Erick showed up on their doorstep on that Wednesday afternoon in late May. "Oh fuck, guys, I think I have a problem," Erick rapidly stated as he entered their home and flopped into one of their oversized couch cushions. Pastor Tim and Jeremy sat on the adjacent love seat, held hands, and patiently listened with bemused expressions on their faces as Erick unloaded his torrent of information, including everything that had happened on the previous evening's date. And it was a date! It was. What do I do? Do I ask her out again? Should I feel guilty about asking her out again? I'm not even looking for this. I have a very nice emotional ecosystem here, and getting involved with someone is just gonna fuck it up. What if I ask her out again? If I do, I'm telling you both, I'm gonna fall in love with her. And then what? What if I get emotionally destroyed again? Why aren't you guys saying anything? And why are you smiling at me like that? Pastor Tim looked at his beloved husband, let out a slight sigh, looked at Erick and said, "We all know what you're going to do. You're going to ask her out again. And you're going to do it because you already know that you have nothing to feel guilty about. We do not find love. Love finds us. And finally, you know just as we do that you have already fallen in love with this girl. We've known it for some time." Erick incredulously responded, No you don't. You don't know that. And, neither do I, but, well, if I do, I'm holding both of you personally responsible for what happens." Erick stormed out of the home. Jeremy looked at his husband and said, "I'm okay with taking responsibility for this. How about you?" "Definitely," Pastor Tim replied as they both began howling with laughter. That Wednesday evening, Maddy recounted the same scene to her friends. "What do you mean he turned you down?" Sam exclaimed. "I know, right? How the fuck does that happen? How does he resist this shit?" an exasperated Maddy retorted. "Told you he was gay," came Jules' dry response. "He's not fucking gay. He's not like any other guy I've been with. He, respects me or something. I mean, he told me he wasn't into one-night stands, and that must be the case because I offered this shit up on a silver platter, and he sent it back to the kitchen. I mean, what's he doing? Conning me so he can get into my pants some other time? Doesn't make sense. Plus, he said the most important thing to him was our friendship. And if that's true, that means he cares about who I am as a person. I'm not just a piece of ass to him. I'm a human being that he enjoys being around, you know?" Then Christy asked the million-dollar question. "What if he doesn't ask you out again? What if he says he just wants to be friends?" Maddy annoyingly replied, "Okay, Christy, I love you, but if you don't have something intelligent to contribute, then please just don't say anything. Of course he's going to ask me out again. He has to, because we're on step 2 of the master plan, so that's happening. Plus, a guy doesn't kiss a girl like that and not be into her. Nope, tomorrow night we'll be going on our second date, and then the fucking world better watch out because we're going to be unstoppable." As Maddy was relaying her argument to her friends, she was silently thinking, "Oh fuck, I'm going to die before 1 tomorrow. Come on, Erick, let me in." A new retail development was beginning to be built in a run-down Brooklyn neighborhood. Construction workers were being brought in from around the country for the massive undertaking. As Maddy and Erick were processing their feelings and plotting their next romantic moves, a large, rusty black pickup truck arrived at the local motel that was housing the construction workers. The back end displayed an out-of-state license plate, a Confederate flag sticker, and a red political sticker carrying an insipidly simple message. Beneath the license plate dangled a pair of truck nuts, just to accentuate the intent behind driving the laughably large vehicle. 2 men emerged from the truck carrying duffel bags and a cooler. After checking in at the front desk, one of the men said, "So, you know any good bars around here? We're looking for some big city pussy." Chapter 18. Girlfriend is better. Erick was pacing outside of the bookstore. His heart was racing and his palms were sweaty. "This is stupid. This is stupid. This is stupid," he kept repeating to himself until he heard the click of the front door of the shop being unlocked. He reactively turned in the opposite direction, then hesitantly turned back to face the door. "Oh, fuck it. What's the worst that could happen?" he thought as he opened the door. 10 feet away was a petite sprite walking away from the door. She heard the front door buzzer and immediately spun around. Her face beamed with excitement as she exclaimed, "Hey, you!" "What's up, Buttercup? How are you?" Erick immediately replied, attempting to retain some sense of normalcy. "Nothing, except I'm excited to see you. What's up with you?" Maddy replied. Um, well, I have a couple of questions to ask you, he stated to Maddy before she said tentatively, Yeah? What would those be? May I please buy my records now? Erick questioned in a childlike, pleading voice as though he were begging for another cookie. Yes, you may, Maddy stated as she lilted her head, right after you ask your second question. Well, Erick began. They were staring into each other's hopeful eyes, fully understanding what this moment meant. I just wanted to ask you if... Just fucking say it, Maddy was screaming at him from her inner thoughts. Well, if you're not busy or anything, if you'd like to have dinner with me tonight. Maddy felt that her response to this moment had to be perfect. It couldn't be too anxious, but not be dismissive either. She completely fucked it up. Oh, she began sarcastically. Well, tonight I'm going out on a second date with this guy that I'm crazy about. The defeated Erick simply said, Oh, okay. Maybe some other time then, before turning toward the door. Oh, fuck, he's literal, Maddy thought before grabbing Erick's arm, spinning him around and saying, You big nudge. You're the guy I'm going out with that I'm crazy about. She was looking up at him into his eyes as he said, Wow, I'm really bad at this, aren't I? Yeah, you're the worst, Maddy purred in response. You're lucky I found you. You'd be lost in this world without me. You might be right about that, Erick replied in a whisper. The front door buzzer sounded as another customer entered, breaking their spell. They nervously laughed and made the arrangements for Erick to pick Maddy up at her apartment at 6, then go to a Chinese restaurant. Erick floated out the door. Maddy floated back to the counter where Sean said, Hey, he forgot his records. That's okay. He'll be back, Maddy dreamily replied. Erick arrived at Maddy's apartment at 5:53 p.m. and rang her buzzer at exactly 6 p.m. She buzzed him up and told him that she would be ready in a moment. She was dressed to kill, figuratively speaking. Slinky red dress, resting mid-thigh, red striped pumps, and black stockings. She looked at her reflection and thought to herself, This fucker's going down tonight. I hope. Her entrance garnered the desired reaction as Erick's eyes nearly popped out of his head at this sultry vision. Wow. You look great, Erick stammered. Oh, this old thing? Maddy demurely replied before Erick burst out laughing and said, You're the worst fucking liar in the world. Actually, I'm not, but, well, I just wanted to look nice tonight. Mission accomplished. Should we go? Erick excitedly offered. Yeah, but before we go, I thought it might be nice to start our second date with a kiss. Erick took her into his arms. The kiss was tender at first, much like 2 nights before, but then it became much more passionate. It was a moment that neither wanted to end, but they knew that it must. Otherwise, they would definitely miss dinner. Okay, let's get this over with. Let's go to dinner, okay? Maddy stated while trying to conceal her flushed complexion. The food arrived, and Erick ignorantly had ordered something different from Maddy. He watched her with bewilderment as she immediately said, Wow, yours looks great, before proceeding to shovel his sweet and sour chicken into her mouth. 3 healthy bites in, Maddy suddenly realized what she was doing, looked up into Erick's shocked but amused expression, and said with her mouth full, Do you want to try some of mine? Sure, Erick exclaimed through his laughter. It's like I'm out with a full-grown 6-year-old, Erick thought as he shook his head in wonderment. Several bites into dinner, Maddy said flirtatiously while gazing at Erick with her sparkling green eyes, You know, I'd still really like to listen to those records. Erick softly replied, I'd love to listen to records with you, before hastily saying, Now, Maddy, when we say listen to records, we're not really talking about listening to records, are we? Maddy's expression was one of shock and delight before she burst out laughing, leaving an anxious Erick's question hovering in the air. Maddy composed herself, looked Erick square in the eyes, and said, Okay, Erick, I'm going to be as blunt as I can be with you. Fucking, Erick. I'm talking about you and I fucking. Okay, good, a relieved Erick replied. That's what I thought, but I didn't want to be too presumptuous. They arrived at Erick's apartment. The Chinese food was thrown into the refrigerator. They stared at each other for the briefest of moments before exploding into passionate kisses. In the height of her passion, Maddy failed to notice if there were chains hanging from the walls, a creepy doll in the corner, or a mentally unhealthy shrine to his mother. Fortunately for her, all that the sparse apartment held were 2 chairs, a small sofa, a television, and the framed autographed Scott's album from the previous show. After Maddy's earlier hopeful wish was granted, Erick went to insert tab A into slot B before he exclaimed, "Oh God, Maddy, I'm so sorry." Well, Maddy thought, he hasn't been late for a while and I'm pretty fucking hot, so hopefully I can get him going for a round 2. But I didn't feel anything. What's wrong? Maddy breathlessly asked. I'm so sorry. I didn't think to buy any condoms. It's okay. I'm on birth control, came Maddy's impatient response. No, really, I'm so sorry. Erick continued before Maddy cut him off and said in a demanding voice, It's okay. Just fuck me. So he did. Lying in the aftermath, Maddy asked if she could use his shower as she felt a bit sticky. Of course, Erick replied. But, before you do, well, I know you have to work early tomorrow, but Maddy's mind began racing. No, he's going to kick me out. Not him. I never thought he'd do that. How fucking disappointing. Erick continued awkwardly. Well, I just thought, if you'd like to, well, you're welcome to spend the night. Then he rapidly said, 'cause I've got shorts and shirts and stuff you could wear, and I bought an extra toothbrush, just in case. A visibly relieved Maddy coyly countered, Do you want me to spend the night? Erick looked Maddy in her glowing emerald eyes and said, I would absolutely love it if the first thing that I saw when I wake up in the morning is your beautiful face. About 30 minutes later, they both really needed a shower. As Maddy was preparing to leave the room to take her shower, she turned back around and said, Okay, I can't let this go. You thought that this might happen tonight, right? Well, I thought it was a possibility, Erick replied. And you bought a toothbrush, but not condoms? What are you thinking? They both exploded into laughter as the silliness of the situation swept over them. Erick did understand woman profoundly. This was a sleepover, and he knew that no sleepover with a woman was complete without a pillow fight, typically in bra and panties. So he instigated one. While watching a topless scene in Return of the Living Dead, Maddy not so innocently inquired, So, who has better tits, me or Linnea Quigley? Okay, Maddy, Erick began with a hint of being annoyed. I'm going to answer your question, but it's an unfair question, and I'm going to explain why it is unfair. First off, you have the best tits there have ever been, are currently, or will ever be, so that should take care of that question for all time. Now, when women ask their partner a question like, Do you think that other woman is pretty? It's an unfair question. They already know the other woman is pretty. Otherwise, they wouldn't be asking. And it leaves the guy in an impossible position. He either has to say, no, the other woman isn't pretty, which is an obvious lie, so now he's untrustworthy. Or he has to admit that, yes, in fact, the other woman is pretty, so now he's in trouble for noticing another woman. So it's an unfair question, and for that, you must be punished. With that, Erick, barely, hit his inquiring adversary in the face with a pillow and began laughing. Oh, you just started World War III, mister, Maddy exclaimed. What the fuck are you going to do about it? Came Erick's arrogant reply. Maddy answered his question by picking up a pillow and viciously wailing on his ass. Erick was defenseless, as he would not hit her very hard, nor would he strike her with his pillow above her waist. All he could do to defend himself was lightly tackle her and delicately pin her to the bed. Hey, no fair, you're cheatin', Maddy exclaimed with the maturity of a 10-year-old. Well, all's fair in love and war, Erick softly stated before giving her a passionate kiss. As they kissed, Maddy thought that this had indeed been the best slumber party she had ever been to. Maddy woke up the next morning and was greeted by 2 sets of inquisitive eyes staring at her from the foot of the bed. Maddy wiped the sleep from her own eyes, smiled, and said, Hey, who are you guys? The 2 9-month-old black cats took this greeting as an invitation to pounce upon their newfound friend, and they began purring and rolling around on her chest. Oh, I'm sorry, Erick stated as he entered the room. I didn't mean to let them in. It's okay, Maddy replied through her laughter at the frolicking kittens. What are their names? Well, Maddy, I would like to introduce you to Hunky, because he's a bit of a chunk, and this little princess is Dory, because, well, she's adorable. Oh, wow. I've got to teach you joke lessons. That was really bad, Maddy replied with fake disgust. I got up early and picked up your coffee and favorite scone from your coffee shop. I hope you don't mind. Of course not. Yummy. I'll be right in, Maddy excitedly exclaimed. Erick was nervously pacing in his small kitchenette as he watched his houseguest wolf down her scone and coffee. Finally, he summoned up his courage and asked, So, can I call on you again? Maddy's immediate laughter was not the response that he had hoped for. Can you call on me again? Maddy astonishedly gasped. I mean, I've just had the best 2 dates of my life, and I've just had the best mind-blowing sex of my life. Yeah, it's a pretty safe bet that we'll be doing this shit again, she concluded as she took another bite of scone with crumbs tumbling all around her. Plus, who the fuck talks like that? Can you call on me again? What are we, second cousins from Appalachia? Does you want to go a curtain? They both exploded into laughter as they made arrangements to meet up at the club later that night following Maddy having dinner with her friends. Sam, Jules, and Christy had done their homework on this guy, minus the anal probe. They could find nothing that he had lied about, nor any major red flags of warning. Following Maddy's overly animated and slightly exaggerated recap of the previous night's events, Sam bluntly said, Okay, Maddy, I'm officially calling it. This is getting serious, and you know what that means, don't you? Maddy let out a sigh of resignation, looked down, and said, Yeah, I'll get him to meet you guys tomorrow night. Just don't be too hard on him, okay? Following dinner, Maddy saw Erick standing at his table, and she was not pleased by what she saw. A young brunette was obviously flirting with him, complete with shoulder pats, overly exaggerated laughter, and hair flips. Who the fuck is this little skank? Maddy thought as she approached the table. Hey, you, Maddy excitedly stated before planting a big kiss on Erick's surprised face. What's up, Buttercup? Hey, I'd like you to meet my friend Julie. And Julie, this is... Before he could finish his introduction, Maddy jutted her hand out in front of her new nemesis and enthusiastically exclaimed, Hiya, I'm Erick's girlfriend, Maddy. The two shook hands and smiled while telepathically saying to each other, Fuck you, bitch. Oh yeah? Well, fuck you, whore. Erick, unable to pick up the frequency of the female telepathy, just stood there and thought, Girlfriend? As the evening progressed at the club, Maddy was surprised at how many people Erick knew. She had known him only from the bookstore, which was almost exclusively one-on-one interactions. But here, especially during a local talent showcase where only the currently performing artist's parents were paying any attention, he was greeted by seemingly everybody there. He made multiple introductions of his, friend Maddy, following a handshake, brief hug, fist pump, or, on one occasion, being lifted from the floor and twirled around by a biker-looking dude. God damn it, Jerry, put me down, Erick exclaimed. Maddy, this is the owner of this dump, Jerry. He's such a fucking Jerry. And Jerry, this is... Hiya, I'm Erick's girlfriend, Maddy. Maddy was determined to get the term girlfriend into Erick's introductory vocabulary. That victory was complete the following morning as Erick asked if she had meant that during their introductions. Well, how did that make you feel? Maddy hesitantly inquired. Oh, I really liked it. And, well, I have no interest in seeing anyone else or anything like that. I just need to make sure, you know. Not sure if you noticed, but I'm not that great at picking up on signals. No shit, huh? Like that chick Julie? Maddy said in an interrogating tone. Julie? What about her? You don't think... Oh, Maddy, don't be silly. That girl has no interest in me like that. All right, I'm just going to let that go, Maddy strategically replied. So since you seem to do all right with blunt talk, let me be as blunt as I can be. You are my boyfriend, and I am your girlfriend, and we are now in an officially exclusive relationship. Got that? Before Erick had a chance to reply, Maddy broke out into tears. Oh, I can't do this to you. Maddy began with anguish in her voice. What's wrong? A confused Erick asked. Maddy, incapable of looking at him with tears streaming down her face, said, I can't let you get too deep with me until I tell you about my past. It's just not fair to you. You need to know what you're getting involved with before things go too far." Erick sincerely replied, "Maddy, you don't have to do this. There isn't one thing that you could ever say to me that would make me change how I feel about you. This isn't necessary." "Yes, it is. And I hope what you just said is true, but I have to tell you this." Maddy then spoke of her mentally abusive upbringing and marriage, the betrayal by her best friend, and her disillusionment in her country's current state, before giving a vivid description of her bottoming out period from a few years prior, complete with a graphic description of her dalliances while calling herself such names as slut and whore. She also confided in him about her near-death experience and how her family and friends had saved her from herself. There was no mention, however, of cut brake lines, exploding heads, scalpels, intentional overdosing, or decapitation. A girl's got to keep her secrets after all. She had never been so afraid in her life and could not bring herself to look at whatever expression that Erick was wearing on his face. She was sure that the look would be one of judgment and disappointment in her. She concluded by stuttering, "So, I just hope that you can see that I'm not that person anymore and how much I care for you." "May I say something now?" Erick inquired in a soothing voice. "Yes," Maddy hesitantly responded. "Okay. First of all, our actions are not necessarily who we are as a person. For example, I could be cornered in an alley and have to murder someone to survive, but that doesn't make me a murderer. That was just what I had to do in order to survive in that moment. So I would submit that your actions from that time in your life are not a true representation of who you are as a person." Why the hell did he use that as an example? Maddy wondered. "Secondly," Erick continued, "I don't know if anyone has told you this before, but I would suggest that you are suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder from all of the mental abuse that you have had to endure. And one of the hallmark symptoms of that disorder is clinical depression. So I think you may have been clinically depressed at that point of your life, and you were trying to accomplish 3 things through your, behavior. Firstly, it was a big fuck you to your parents and probably ex-husband. Secondly, you felt that your life was out of control, and that was the one thing that you could use to try to grasp onto some sense of control within your life. And third, I think that was your way of self-medicating because that, activity releases endorphins in the pleasure centers of our brains, and you were looking for at least some temporary relief from your pain." What the fuck is going on? Maddy thought. He isn't judging me. He's just explaining my behavior. "Okay, the next thing that I would like to point out," Erick continued, "is that we have no control over what we have done in the past, so you might want to consider dropping any guilt that you may feel about things that you have no control over, and focus that energy on your future. And finally, we are all made up of our past experiences. We are who we are today because of what we have experienced in the past. And if you could get back and change just one little thing about your past, you may not be the exact person that you are today. And Maddy." At this point, Erick put his index finger under her saturated chin and gently lifted it up so that his eyes met hers. "I really like the person you are today. In fact, I have a greater respect for you and care about you even more now that I have better understanding of what you had to endure to become this incredible person sitting before me now." A pleasantly bewildered Maddy then exclaimed, "You mean, you really don't care that I've had way more, partners than you?" Erick calmly replied, "Well, it isn't so much that I don't care as it is that it simply has no impact on how I feel about you. And besides, as far as I'm concerned, we're even in that department." "How the fuck does that math work?" An even more astonished Maddy blurted out. Erick, with a slight chuckle, said, "Well, it may be true that you have me beat in quantity of partners, but I believe that I have you beat in quality of experiences, because all of my intimate experiences meant something to me. So, as I said, as far as I'm concerned, from the time of our first date, we're perfectly even." Maddy's mind was racing. What had he just done? He didn't judge. He didn't scold. He didn't lecture. He just explained the situation and then said that we were even. He's totally letting me off the hook. But I have to make sure. So, You're not going to break up with me? Erick delicately lifted her head once more so that she could see the tears forming in his eyes. Maddy, at this point, I can't imagine my life without you in it. But I'm telling you right now, Maddy, no one, including you, no one will ever say a disparaging word about you or threaten you in any way as long as I'm around. I simply won't hear it, Maddy, because, to me, you are perfect in every way. Now, if you don't mind, I could really use a hug. Maddy fell into his soothing embrace, sobbing. They held each other until he softly whispered into her ear, Now, I need a favor from you. Yeah, anything. What is it? Maddy submissively inquired. Erick, sensing her vulnerability, took full advantage of the situation as he said, Would you please pick out a place for lunch? 'Cause I'm fucking starving. The pair burst into tension-releasing laughter as Dory chased Hunky under the chair. Well, I hope you're fucking happy, Erick exclaimed as he flopped down on the oversized couch cushion that Saturday afternoon. What are we supposed to be happy about? A smiling Pastor Tim inquired. Oh, wipe that fucking smirk off of your face, both of you, Erick exclaimed, attempting to project being annoyed. I told you both that if I went out with her again that I'd fall in love, and that's exactly what has happened. In fact, she confided in me about some things from her past today, and she put so much trust in me that now I know that I can put all of my trust in her, and that made me fall even more in love with her. So, that's just fucking great. Well, Jeremy chimed in, have you told her? Told her? Erick replied incredulously. Fuck no. I'm gonna totally pussy out, and if she feels the same way, maybe she'll say it first. Then I'm off the hook, and all I have to do is reciprocate. Okay, that's enough of this shit. I've got to go home and get ready. I've got to meet her friends tonight. Pray for me. And that is where we will leave off for today. Thank you all so much for joining me for these chapters of Hanging Chads. If you liked it, make sure to check out everything that is backlogged over here on YouTube, as well as checking out everything in the Linktree link down in the description. I have been Matthew Allen. This has been What a Book, and we will be back next week.